We often talk about spiritual practice as a path to truth, but sometimes the hardest truth to face isn't about the nature of the universe, it's the truth of what we actually need right now in our own human frailty. Today I'm exploring why ruthless self honesty is the cornerstone of a psychologically grounded spiritual practice, and why just sitting isn't always the right tool for the job. In some spiritual circles, I think there's an unspoken hierarchy. Some believe that formless meditation, just sitting in pure awareness, is the highest path. There's a subtle stigma that suggests that if you enjoy a more comprehensive practice with structure or relative practices of love and compassion, or if you're struggling with emotional pain, you're somehow less advanced. But let's be honest, it's one thing to touch a moment of clarity on the cushion. It's quite another to maintain that clarity when life feels overwhelming. Sometimes the tools we've been given might be spiritually high tech, but they aren't the right tools for the specific work our hearts need in any particular moment. When we experience deep emotional wounds, for instance, being told to just let it go or remember it's not real can actually become a form of spiritual bypassing. It can also sound as though the people saying such things, though they are probably trying to help, are actually being rather dismissive of our struggles. And then there's just move on and stop holding on directives that we might even be saying to ourselves if we've heard it a lot during our time in a spiritual community. This kind of attitude assumes that we haven't tried our best to do just that. And newsflash, it isn't working. Because meditation, I have discovered, isn't always all that I need, especially when we're dealing with trauma, and especially when that trauma was caused by someone in a spiritual context. We can know that emotion is ephemeral and not a solid, everlasting thing. We can even experience that when we look at it, but that doesn't make it hurt any less, and it doesn't stop it from keeping on coming up, at least in my experience. Not if it's a strong one. Not if it's something we really should be paying attention to. And I think if we use meditation to bypass our psychological needs, we aren't transcending our problems or even transforming them. We're just repressing them. Ruthless self honesty means admitting when we're in a quagmire of pain. It's saying, right now, I can't cut through this misery with awareness alone. Right now, I need something more. And what we need when we're like this is the skillful means aspect of the path, the love and compassion. And we need it from ourselves, for ourselves, so we can accept where we are with love. But us Westerns often have a deeply wounded self and find it hard to accept ourselves where we are, let alone show ourselves some love and compassion. And we might need to do a bit of additional inner work to heal this fundamental lack of a sense of self-worth. And this is where the intersection of psychology and spirituality becomes vital, I think. For those of us navigating life after leaving formal traditions, we need a way to process our emotions that don't have the baggage of the religious dogma we've left. Now, psychotherapy gives us many ways to do this, and internal family system, that's often called inner parts work, is something that I've found really helpful. But when it comes to having support on a daily basis in some kind of spiritual practice, I've found that the kind of visualization framework used in Vajrayana provides a great structure for self nurture. But I'm not talking about actual Vajrayana within the traditions that brought it to the West. I'm talking about using a Vajrayana derived format as a structure for psycho spiritual practice. So instead of working with a traditional deity and the rigid practices around them, we can work with the archetype of the wisdom self. Now, Carl Jung called this our individuated self, or just the self with a capital letter. It's our whole self, with all its parts encompassed, acknowledged, and accepted. Now, I call it the wisdom self because that encompasses wisdom in its meaning as emptiness and luminosity, and the self as it's understood in Jungian psychology, which is our self unified in all its aspects, our big self. We can think of the wisdom self as a manifestation or expression of that source of unconditional love and clarity that exists within the ground of our own being. It's not something to worship. It's a wise inner guide with which we can connect. And you may have connected with this in your meditation practice. But when we no longer have an outer guide and we're wary of anyone claiming to be such a guide, then we really do need to connect to the guide we already have within. We just need to make sure it's our wisdom self we're turning to as our guide and not our deluded self. But there's a way to identify with the wisdom self and receive their love and compassion that bypasses the conceptual mind. So when the world feels a bit too loud or your mind feels scattered and none of your psychological or spiritual practices are helping, try this simple shift that worked for me. Imagine your wisdom self before you in an ethereal, transparent form. Any form that pops into your mind at the thought of your wisdom self is fine. There could be a star or a ball of light or a body of light without any details. What's important is knowing that they are an imaginative manifestation of your inner love and compassion, a source of luminous healing light. And now, instead of trying to empty your mind of pain, imagine placing those wounded, anxious, frustrated parts of yourself into that light. And that light gives you the kind of love you need to help you through whatever is overwhelming you. So it's not about pushing feelings away. It's about having a kind of spiritual friend within yourself to help you hold them. Now, admitting we need more than a simple meditation isn't a sign of failure that I thought it was for a long time. It's an act of profound self-care. And honestly, I think it takes more strength to be honest about our human needs than it does to walk around pretending we've got it all figured out. If you're walking this path of self-honesty and you're trying to build a practice that is both spiritually deep and psychologically sound by yourself, I've shared much more of my journey and the specific techniques that I use over on my Substack. I'd love for you to join me there. It's a space where spiritually independent people can get support in developing a truly grounded contemplative practice. It's especially helpful for those who've left Tibetan Buddhism, can't do the traditional practices anymore, but would like to have some kind of comprehensive practice to hold them throughout their day as they navigate the messy bits of being human. You can find the link in the description below. But before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever felt the pressure to appear spiritually mature while you were secretly struggling? If so, what were the circumstances around that? Let's talk about it in the comments. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, do like, share, and subscribe. And do click the icon for the little bell icon to be notified of my videos, because I post them at odd times, not on a regular schedule, just when I'm inspired. So it's good that you have some kind of notification for when a video comes up. But if you would like to hear from me more, come along to my Substack. I hope I'll see you there. Bye.